Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's edition of my top starts and sits for week 12 of this NFL season. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to go ahead and dive in this video. You should know by now that you're going to get my top two starts and sits at the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. As always, we start with the most important position in football, quarterback. My top start of the week, I am going to go with Justin Herbert against the Ravens. Ravens are tied for the third most allowed points per game against the quarterback position. When you look at their last four games, three of the quarterbacks they have faced have thrown for at least 220 passing yards, and they've also given up 8 passing touchdowns a game. Averages out to 2 touchdowns over their last 4 games, even though Russell didn't throw a touchdown last week. But I still like Justin this week. Just because he's been playing really good football over the last, actually the whole season, last couple months, though, that passing attack for Los Angeles has really come along. So I'm looking for Justin Herbert to have a good performance on Monday night. My other top start, I'm going to go with Bo Nix, the rookie quarterback for Denver against the Raiders. Yeah, he's really hitting his stride late in the season. Going against this Raiders defense, who have allowed the 7th most points per game against the quarterback position. Now, he's already played this defense earlier in the season. In that first matchup, he threw for 206 passing yards. He just only had 9 rushing yards. But that's what you do like Bo, is he does have a level of a floor with his rushing ability. And he also had 3 touchdowns in that game. That's why I really like him. And then when you look at what Las Vegas has allowed in their last 4 games, 3 of the quarterbacks they've faced has thrown for at least 250 passing yards, and they have allowed not the last 4 games. This is from their last 3 games. All 3 quarterbacks they faced in their last 3 games has thrown for at least 250 passing yards, and in those 3 games they've allowed 10 passing touchdowns. So I'm looking for Bo to get around 225 total yards between passing and running, and to finish with at least 2 touchdowns on Sunday. My top sits, I am going to go with Sam Darnold against the Bears. The Bears have actually allowed the fewest points per game against quarterbacks this season. Now, in their last 4 games, only 2 quarterbacks threw for over 200 passing yards against their defense. That was Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love. And they've only allowed 3 passing touchdowns in their last 4 games. And like I kind of said when I suggested the Bears as a possible streaming defense option, the Vikings kind of do have their struggles when they play in Chicago. So I'm thinking of a floor performance is going to happen for Sam Darnold this week. My other top sit, I'm going to go with Matthew Stafford against the Eagles defense. The Eagles have allowed the 4th fewest points per game against quarterbacks this season. In their last 4 games, only 1 quarterback threw for over 200 passing yards against their defense. He happens to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, which was Joe Burrow. And they've only given up 2 passing touchdowns in their last 4 games. So I'm looking for this to be a floor performance as well for Stafford in Week 12. Moving into the running back position, my top starts and sits. My top starts, I'm going to go with Brian Robinson Jr. And if with all these 6 teams on a bye, if you wanted to take a chance on Austin Ekeler in your flex, I would definitely understand that as well. Going against this Cowboys defense, who are allowing the 2nd most points per game against running backs this season. In their last 4 games, they've allowed 3 different running backs to finish over 100 total yards. They've only given up 5, not only, but they've given up 5 running back touchdowns, but it's more the yardage. I would expect Brian Robinson to push the 100-yard mark, and I think Austin Ekeler can have an effective game through the passing attack for Washington on Sunday. My other top start, I like James Conner against the Seahawks. The Seahawks are actually allowing the 9th most points per game against running backs this season. In his career, James Conner has faced the Seahawks 5 times. 4 with the Seattle Seahawks, once with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He averages 101 total yards in each of those games. And then he has 5 touchdowns in each of those games. Now, one of those games he didn't score a touchdown, but he does have 5 total touchdowns in the 5 games that he's faced Seattle in his career. And then when you look at this matchup as well, besides his past success in the last 4 games for Seattle, they've allowed 4 different running backs to finish with at least 95 total yards. Now, they've only given up 3 running back touchdowns, but they've been giving up the yardage, and you consider Conner's success against Seattle in his career, which is why I like him as a play in Week 12. Now, my top sits, and I will omit 2 before I dive into both these running backs. There are 6 teams on a bye, so you might have to play these guys depending on who's... Like, I got to play DeAndre Swift this week. even though I'm not going to talk about him first, in my flex, just because I have guys on a bye. There's 6 teams on a bye, so I understand why you might have to play a Chuba Hubbard or a DeAndre Swift. I would just temper your expectations if you play them. They're probably going to have a floor performance, but when you do your like daily lineups, I would look to avoid to have these names in my daily lineups this weekend. With that being said, starting with my top sit, Chuba Hubbard against the Chiefs. The Chiefs are allowing the fewest points per game against the running back position. Now, before I dive in what KC has done against running backs over their last 4 games, one other factor with Chuba Hubbard is Jonathan Brooks, their rookie running back they drafted, I believe, in the 2nd round. He's going to make his season debut this weekend, so he's going to cut into some touches. I don't expect him to get a high amount of touches in his first action, but still, he's going to take some snaps away from Hubbard at points in this matchup. And then when you look at this as well, over their last 4 games, the most rushing yards that KC has allowed to a single running back was 53 rushing yards, and that was Audric Estime a couple weeks ago. And they've only given up 3 running back touchdowns their last 4 games. One last note on this too. Don't you just kind of feel like after the Chiefs just lost their first game, and they've kind of been playing close games all season, I think they're going to want to blow out the Panthers this weekend. So if they end up going up 2+ touchdowns in this game, that means Carolina is going to have to throw the ball a lot. So that's why I also don't like Hubbard, because I could see him, the game script not going his way. My other top sit, DeAndre Swift against the Vikings. The Vikings are allowing the 3rd fewest points per game against running backs this season. In their last 4 games, only 1 running back finished over 50 rushing yards against them. That was Kyren Williams a couple weeks ago. And then what I really don't like about it too is they've only given up 1 running back touchdown. So you're going to have to bet that he either gets you some over the 50 rushing yards, or he at least finds the end zone once or twice for you on Sunday. My tops, moving into the wide receiver position, my top starts, feeding off the Justin Herbert love. I also do like his top wide receiver, Ladd McConkey, against the Ravens. Ravens are allowing the most points per game against wide receivers. And why I really like them is they've been giving up a lot of yards over their last 4 games. In their last 4 games, they have allowed 6 different wide receivers to finish with at least 75 receiving yards. And they've also given up 5 wide receiver touchdowns. So if I like Justin Herbert, that means I'm going to like his top option in the passing attack, so I definitely would have Ladd McConkey in my lineups this weekend. My other top start, I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley against the Texans. The Texans are actually allowing the 5th most points per game against wide receivers this year. They're also giving up a lot of yardage in their last 4 games. In their last 4 games, they have allowed 5 different wide receivers to finish with at least 85 receiving yards. And then in those 4 games, they've also given up 6 wide receiver touchdowns. So I would expect, Calvin's been playing a lot better football than what he was doing at the beginning of the season, and I'm looking for him to have a big performance in week 12. Moving into my sits, I'm going to go with Jordan Addison against that Bears defense, kind of feeding off why I don't like Sam Darnold, going with one of his passing options. If there's going to be a guy that goes off in this matchup, I would bet Justin Jefferson would be, not Jordan Addison. With that being said, the Bears are allowing the 3rd fewest points per game against wide receivers this season. Now, they've allowed 2 different wide receivers to finish over 75 receiving yards in their last 4 games. That was Terry McLaurin and Christian Watson. Now, again, if there's going to be one wide receiver to finish over 75 receiving yards on Sunday, it's probably going to be Justin Jefferson. And then they've only given up 3 wide receiver touchdowns in their last 4 games. So similar to last week when I suggested Addison, he only got to 61 yards, right? But that touchdown saved his day. So if you're going to play Addison this week, you just got to hope he finds the end zone to save his day once again. My other top sits. This might be weird. Cody, didn't you just tell me the Chiefs are going to blow out the Panthers? But there might be a reason why you don't want to play Patrick Mahomes wide receivers this week. I'm going to suggest sitting DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy against the Panthers. They're just because of some surprising stats so far this season. The Panthers are actually allowing the 7th fewest points per game against wide receivers this season. In their last 4 games, only 2 wide receivers finished over 55 receiving yards against their defense. That was Terry McLaurin and Cortland Sutton for the Broncos. And what's interesting is not one wide receiver has caught a touchdown against Carolina in their last 4 games. Now, what I talked about Chuba Hubbard, right, where I could see the Chiefs blowing out the Panthers in this game, where the game script doesn't go his way. Same thing with DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy. If Kansas City can get up to a 2+ score lead by halftime, by the 3rd quarter, in the second half, they're just going to run the ball as much as possible, and that's going to take away opportunities for DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy, which is why I don't like them in Week 12. Moving into my top starts and sits at tight end, there weren't a lot of great options this week. Honestly, the top start is Travis Kelce, but I can't tell you guys to play Travis Kelce. That's also the thing, too. I just talked about DeAndre Swift and Xavier Worthy, and I mentioned how no wide receivers have scored touchdowns against Carolina. That's because they're giving up a lot of yards and touchdowns to the tight end position. So if you had Travis Kelce this week, I'm looking for a boom week out of him. With that being said, my top start of the week, this is a super deep sleeper. This is maybe probably like a 12-14 team league if you're going to stream him. If you do daily lineups like I do it on FanDuel, and you're looking for a cheap option at the tight end position, this is a name to consider. Ja'Tavion Sanders against the Chiefs. The last time they played, he actually caught it. Last time the Panthers played was in that Germany game against the Giants defense, and he caught a touchdown in that game. And he's kind of impressed me over there, last 2 or 3 games. Not to the point where I wanted to suggest him as a waiver wire target quite yet, but I like his matchup this week, going against this Kansas City defense, who is tied for the 5th most points per game against the tight ends this season. In their last 4 games, they have allowed at least three tight ends to finish with at least 40 receiving yards, only giving up 1 tight end touchdown. But like I keep on talking about the script, right? The game script where I think this game's going to go, where I think Kansas City's going to win this game by 2+ touchdowns. If that happens, that means Carolina is going to throw the ball a lot in the second half, which is going to create more opportunity and create a volume of targets for Sanders, which is why I like him as a sneaky streaming option in Week 12. My other top start, I've been suggesting this guy the last few weeks, and he's really come along for the Miami offense. Jonnu Smith against the Patriots. This is a revenge game. He did play for the Patriots at one point in his career. Now, when you look at this matchup, they're right there in the middle of the NFL. They're allowing the 15th most points per game against tight ends this year. But in their last 4 games, 3 tight ends have finished with at least 30 receiving yards. And then they've also, why I really like him, they've given up 3 tight end touchdowns this weekend. So I'm looking for him to get 30 to 50 receiving yards and a touchdown, which is all you can ask for out of your tight end position this season. Lastly, moving into my sits, I'm going to go with Cade Otton against the Giants. Now, really quick, before I dive into the stats, Mike Evans is expected to play this week, so that's why I don't really like him this week, because Mike Evans is obviously going to take away all those targets Cade Otton was seeing while Evans was out with his hamstring injury. Then when you look at this matchup, the Giants are actually tied for the fewest allowed points per game against tight ends this season. The most in their last 4 games, the most receiving yards they allowed to a single tight end was 29 receiving yards, and that was Darnell Washington. And then they've only given up 1 tight end touchdown this season, which happened to be Ja'Tavion Sanders out in Germany a couple weeks ago. So I know Cade has been a very strong performer. He's been getting those targets, but if you do play him this week, I understand there's 6 teams on a bye week, but I would just temper your expectations with that. My other sit, a guy that definitely disappointed me in one of my leagues this past weekend, was 0 points, which is more of a reason not to play him this week. But when you look at this matchup, Tucker Kraft against the 49ers, the 49ers are actually tied for the 3rd fewest points per game against tight ends this season. In their last 4 games, only 1 tight end finished over 35 receiving yards, and that was Noah Gray, the backup tight end for Kansas City. That means I think Travis Kelce finished with 17 yards against the 49ers defense, if I remember right. And then also, too, why I don't like Kraft, the 49ers have not allowed a tight end to score in their last 4 games, so I would be looking at a different option. Honestly, I would roll a dice over Ja'Tavion. I would roll a dice with Ja'Tavion Sanders over Tucker Kraft this week if you don't have better options out there to pick up off the waivers at this point of the week. So yeah, those are my top starts and sits for week 12 of this NFL season. Final few weeks, guys, until the playoffs. Hopefully you already locked up a spot. I know there's definitely some leagues I'm sure trying to make a push for the playoffs. So hopefully we all can get that done. Wish you guys the best of luck. But as always, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. Subscribe to me on all my social media platforms. I'm mainly on X, but you can find me on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy your night, your weekend, your week, evening, morning, whenever you're watching this. I'll talk to you guys next week. Peace out.